A building that should have crushed 100 lives somehow stayed standing. And the one who held it wasn't a machine or a war fleet, just a human and someone everyone feared. Where are you watching from? Subscribe to help the channel grow, because what happens next shouldn't be possible. The story begins now. Laura Thrain walked through Sector 6 with her shoulders curved forward, her 3.5-meter frame bent like a question mark, trying to fit into a world built for smaller answers. The industrial district of Vera smelled like hot metal and recycled air, and every step she took echoed against the canyon walls that cradled the vertical city. She had learned to make herself smaller. Not physically, that was impossible, but in every other way that mattered. Quiet footsteps, soft voice, eyes down. The morning shift workers parted around her like water around stone, and she pretended not to notice the way human children grabbed their parents' hands and whispered the word that followed her everywhere. Monster. In the cafeteria, Laura approached the reinforced seating area designated for Thrain workers. There were only 3 others on this shift. She lowered herself carefully onto the metal bench, and it groaned anyway. A human worker 2 tables over flinched at the sound. Laura picked up her meal ration, her pearl-gray hands dwarfing the standard container. The food was the same everyone else ate, but somehow it tasted like loneliness. She caught her reflection in the polished metal wall and saw what they saw. Amber eyes, set too deep in an angular face, skin that shimmered blue-gray under the lights, muscles that could bend steel. Living weapon, she had heard someone call her once. She broke her 3rd chair that week reaching for her water. The crack was loud enough that the entire cafeteria went silent. Laura stood quickly, mumbled an apology to no one in particular, and left without finishing her meal. The rest of her shift passed in mechanical silence. Lift, carry, stack, repeat. Her supervisor, a thin Colluvian with too many arms, barely looked at her when assigning tasks. She was good at her job precisely because no one wanted to talk to her long enough to find out what she was good at. Evening came with Varys's typical suddenness, the canyon shadows swallowing the industrial complex in minutes. Laura was checking the structural integrity of a loading platform when the lights died. Complete darkness hit the sector like a fist. Emergency lights flickered but failed to catch. In the blackness, Laura heard it. The groan of overstressed metal, the crack of support beams giving way, and then the screams. She moved without thinking. Her eyes adjusted faster than human ones, catching the thermal signatures of workers trapped beneath a collapsed scaffold. The main support beam was tilting, tons of industrial equipment about to crush at least a dozen people. Laura reached the collapse in 4 strides and positioned herself beneath the falling beam. The weight hit her shoulders like judgment, driving her to one knee. Her muscles screamed, her spine compressed, and something inside her chest burned white-hot. But she held. She held while workers scrambled free in the darkness. She held while someone shouted for emergency crews. She held while her skin cracked and blue blood traced lines down her arms. When the lights finally came back on, Laura was still there, bent under impossible weight, surrounded by people who stared at her with something that was not quite fear. One of them, a thin human man with a mechanical leg and eyes the color of rust, looked directly at her face and smiled. That smile felt more dangerous than the collapse. Laura did not know it yet, but in that moment everything changed. The weight she had been carrying her entire life had just gotten a little bit lighter and a little bit more complicated. The medical team insisted on checking her, but Laura waved them away with hands still trembling from exertion. She had retreated to the far corner of the emergency staging area, making herself small again, despite having just held up half a building. The human with the mechanical leg found her anyway. He walked with a slight hitch in his step, his prosthetic making a soft hydraulic whisper with each stride. He was lean and scarred, with hands that looked like they had rebuilt things and broken them in equal measure. When he stopped in front of her, he had to tilt his head back to meet her eyes. Most humans avoided that. This one sought it out. "Eli Navarro," he said, extending a hand that was absurdly small compared to hers. You saved my life back there. Figured I should at least know your name before I start buying you coffee." Lura stared at the offered hand like it might be a weapon. "I do not drink coffee." "Tea then, beer, recycled water. I am not picky about the beverage, just the company." He grinned, and there was something absolutely reckless about it. "You are Lura, right? Security and heavy lifting?" "Yes." She did not take his hand. Could not. Her fingers were still locked in the shape of bearing weight. Eli noticed and lowered his hand without offense. Fair enough. Hands need a break after holding up the world. He leaned against a nearby crate, casual as breathing. "So here is what I am thinking. You just did the most impressive thing I have seen in 15 years of colony work, and now you are hiding in a corner like you broke something." "I broke 3 chairs this week," he laughed, sharp and genuine. "Only 3. I broke my entire leg once. You are doing great." Despite herself, despite everything, Lura felt the corner of her mouth twitch. It was not quite a smile, but it was closer than she had come in months. Eli tilted his head, studying her with an engineer's eye for structural problems. "You know what I think? I think you spend so much time trying not to scare people that you forget some of us do not scare easy." He pushed off from the crate and took a step closer. "You think your size scares humans?" Lura said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. Eli's grin widened into something fierce and honest. "Perfect. Scare everyone but me." The words hit her harder than the falling beam had. She opened her mouth, found no response, and closed it again. Somewhere in her chest, beneath the cultural iron that marked her as Thrain, something shifted. "I do not understand you," Lura finally managed. "Good. I would be boring if you did." Eli checked his portable terminal and grimaced. "They are going to want statements about the collapse. Investigations, paperwork, the usual nightmare. You need a witness who saw what actually happened?" "Why would you do that?" "Because you saved my life, and I am annoyingly loyal to people who keep me alive." He started to walk away, then paused. "Also because the cafeteria chairs were designed by a Colluvian who thinks anyone over 2 meters tall is a statistical anomaly. It is not your fault they are built wrong." He left her there, standing in the emergency lights, feeling something she had not felt in years. Hope was a dangerous thing to feel. 2 days later, Lura found a note stuck to her locker. "Cafeteria, 1300 hours. Bringing chairs that will not die under you. Also bringing terrible jokes. You have been warned. E.N." She told herself she would not go. She told herself this was a mistake. She told herself a lot of things. She went anyway. Eli was already there when she arrived, sitting at a reinforced table in the back corner with 2 actual Thrain-grade seats he had somehow procured. He waved her over like this was normal. Like having lunch with someone who could accidentally crush him was just another Tuesday. "Okay," he said as she carefully sat down, the chair holding without protest. "Now we eat, and you tell me why you walk like you are apologizing for existing." Lura picked up her meal ration, and, for the first time in longer than she could remember, the food did not taste like loneliness. It tasted like the beginning of something terrifying. Something that might actually matter. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for the following week, which gave Lura exactly 7 days to remember why hope was dangerous. The official report called it a safety incident requiring review. The unofficial whispers called it what everyone was thinking. A Thrain had been involved in a structural collapse, and the company wanted to make sure it would not happen again. The fact that she had saved lives was mentioned in paragraph 7, after 3 paragraphs about potential liability. Eli showed up to her workstation with a datapad and a scowl that could cut metal. "Did you know," he said without preamble, "that Regulation 42 Atlas 7 explicitly prohibits Thrain workers from holding supervisory positions? Or that there are 17 other regulations that basically classify your people as potentially hazardous equipment?" Lura continued organizing cargo containers, each one light enough in her hands to be insulting. "Yes, I know." And you are fine with this? I am alive. I have work. That is more than some have. Eli made a sound like a grinding gear. That is the saddest thing I have heard all month, and I once listened to a Colluvian recite poetry about tax reform. He pulled up something on his datapad. I am filing a counter-report, citing you for heroism instead of hazard, getting statements from everyone you saved. Please do not. Too late. Already did it. Lura set down the container she was holding and finally looked at him. Eli, you do not understand what you are doing. Drawing attention to me draws attention to all Thrain workers here. If they decide I am a problem, they will decide we are all problems. So we make them decide you are all heroes instead. The simplicity of it was almost painful. Lura knelt down so she could meet his eyes without him straining his neck. It does not work that way. Then we change the way it works. Before she could respond, a small figure darted between the cargo stacks. A human girl, maybe 14, with tangled dark hair and eyes that had seen too much too soon. She froze when she saw Lura, but unlike other children, she did not run. You are the one who held the beam, the girl said. It was not a question. Lura nodded slowly. The girl considered this with the gravity of someone much older. That was stupid. You could have died. Many would have died if I had not. Still stupid. The girl glanced at Eli, then back to Lura. I am Mina. I work waste reclamation. I saw what you did. She paused, then added quietly, Thank you. She left before Lura could respond, disappearing into the industrial maze like smoke. Eli watched her go. Orphan. Parents died in a mining accident last year. She does not talk to anyone. He looked back at Lura with something knowing in his expression. Until now. That evening, Lura found Eli in the maintenance bay, working on his prosthetic leg with the focused intensity of someone having an argument with inanimate objects. She sat down nearby, the floor creaking under her weight. I am going to resign, she said. Eli did not look up from his work. No, you are not. It is the logical solution. It is the coward solution, and you are many things, but you are not a coward. He finally met her eyes. What is that? He was pointing to her chest, where her work suit had torn during the collapse. Through the gap, a small piece of metal was visible, embedded where her heart would be. Lura's hand moved to cover it instinctively. It is personal. Personal enough to glow when you are stressed? Because it has been doing that for the last 10 minutes. She hesitated, then slowly moved her hand away. The piece of metal was no larger than a human thumb, dark iron that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, except when it pulsed with a faint blue luminescence that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. It is called soul iron, Lura said quietly. Every Thrain receives one when they reach maturity. It is placed where the heart beats strongest. She touched it gently. It carries the weight we promise to bear. Our duties, our debts, our reasons for existing. Eli set down his tools. What weight does yours carry? To never hurt anyone again. To be strong enough to protect, gentle enough to matter. She looked away. I thought if I made myself small enough, quiet enough, I could keep that promise, but all I did was make myself invisible. You are not invisible to me. That, Lura said softly, is what frightens me most. The next morning, she went to submit her resignation. She had the form filled out, the words rehearsed, the decision made. Eli was waiting outside the administrative office. You saved lives, he said, blocking her path. You held up a building with your bare hands while people escaped. You have done nothing wrong, and I will be damned if I let you punish yourself for being exactly what this station needs. Eli, please move. Make me. She could have, easily, but they both knew she would not. Why do you care? Lura's voice cracked on the question. Why does any of this matter to you? Eli stepped closer, looking up at her with absolute certainty. Because you saved my life. And where I come from, that means I do not get to stand by while you throw yours away." Lura stood there, resignation form in hand, and felt the weight of every choice she had ever made pressing down on her shoulders. Then, slowly, she tore the form in half. "This is a mistake," she whispered. Eli grinned. "Good. The best things usually are." Eli's friends were exactly what Lura expected: scarred, suspicious, and deeply unimpressed with her existence. They met in the maintenance bay after hours, 5 human veterans who had survived colony collapses, corporate wars, and enough bad decisions to fill a freighter. They looked at Lura the way munitions experts looked at unexploded ordnance. "This is your plan," said Torres, a woman with burned scars covering half her face and a tactical implant where her left eye used to be. "Adopt a Thrain?" "I prefer ally with," Eli corrected. "Adopt sounds condescending." "It is condescending. She could break all of us without trying." "Which is exactly why we want her on our side." Eli leaned against his workbench, casual but calculated. "The company is using the collapse as an excuse to tighten restrictions on Thrain workers. If we do not push back now, they will push them out entirely. Then it will be someone else. Then us." "You are asking us to risk our jobs for people we do not know," said Crane, a massive man with a prosthetic arm covered in scorch marks. "I am asking you to remember what it felt like when someone wrote you off as broken equipment." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Lura had remained standing in the corner, trying to be as unobtrusive as possible. It was not working. Being 3.5 meters tall made subtlety a theoretical concept. "Does she even want our help?" asked Patel, the youngest of the group, who had lost both legs below the knee and walked on advanced prosthetics that clicked softly with each step. Everyone looked at Lura. She cleared her throat, the sound like distant thunder. "I do not want anyone to risk themselves for me." "See?" Torres gestured at her. "She does not even want to be here." "That is not what I said." Lura took a careful step forward, and 3 of the 5 veterans tensed. She stopped immediately. "I have spent my life being afraid of hurting people. The idea that people might hurt themselves helping me is worse." Crane studied her with the intensity of someone who had survived by reading threats. "Why did you hold the beam? You could have escaped." "Because people were dying." "That is it? No grand philosophy, no cultural obligation?" Lura met his eyes. "Is there supposed to be more?" Something shifted in Crane's expression. He glanced at Eli, then back to Lura. "Maybe not." He did not offer friendship, but his posture relaxed fractionally. "I am not promising anything, but I will listen." It was not an alliance, but it was not rejection either. 3 days later, the toxic leak happened. Lura was moving equipment in the lower maintenance tunnel when the alarm shrieked to life. The chemical smell hit her first, sharp and wrong. She turned toward the source and saw the veteran crew trapped in a dead-end corridor. The emergency door sealed behind them and toxic vapor flooding in from a ruptured coolant line. They had maybe 90 seconds before the concentration became lethal. Lura ran. The emergency door was locked down by automated safety protocols, designed to contain chemical spills by sacrificing anyone unlucky enough to be on the wrong side. Lura grabbed the door frame and pulled. Metal screamed. Her muscles burned. The soul iron in her chest blazed hot enough that she could feel it through her ribs. The door tore free. She reached into the toxic cloud, grabbed whoever she could reach and hauled them out. Torres first, coughing and cursing, then Patel, then 2 others she did not know. They stumbled past her, choking on clean air. "Where is Crane?" Lura shouted. "Deeper in." Torres gasped. Lura went back into the vapor. It burned her lungs and made her eyes water, but Thrain physiology was more resilient than human. She found Crane collapsed against the far wall, unconscious. She picked him up like he weighed nothing and carried him out. Medical arrived minutes later. Everyone survived. When Lura tried to leave, Torres grabbed her arm. The human woman's hand did not even wrap halfway around Lura's wrist, but the grip was solid. "You held the beam," Torres said. "And now you held us." She looked at the other veterans, who nodded one by one. "We hold you now. That is how this works." Crane, oxygen mask still on his face, extended his prosthetic hand. "Welcome to the worst union in the galaxy." Lura took his hand carefully. For the first time in years, she felt something that was not quite family, but was close enough to matter. The next day, Mina appeared at the maintenance bay. She had brought a drawing, crude but earnest, showing a figure holding up a beam with stars around her. "I made this," Mina said, shoving the paper at Lura. "It is you, being stupid and brave." Lura took the drawing with trembling fingers. "Thank you." "Eli says you are learning to high-five. That is wrong. Here." Mina demonstrated the motion. Like this. Lura attempted it. Her hand was so large compared to Mina's that the girl nearly spun in a complete circle from the impact. They both laughed. It was the first time Lura had laughed in front of someone without apologizing for the sound. It was deep and genuine and absolutely free. Eli watched from across the bay, and his smile held something that looked dangerously close to pride. "See," he called out. "Told you the chairs were not your fault." Lura realized with quiet certainty that she was no longer trying to make herself smaller. She was learning to fit by being exactly as large as she was. And for the first time in her life, that felt like enough. The protest started small. Eli and his veterans, standing outside the administrative complex with hand-painted signs that read, "We hold the line," and "Heroes do not have height limits." By noon, it had grown to include 24 workers. By evening, over 100 people crowded the plaza, human and Thrain, standing together in something that looked almost like solidarity. Lura tried to stay in the background. Crowds made her nervous, and this much attention felt like standing under a spotlight built from judgment. But every time she stepped back, someone would notice and wave her forward. "They need to see you," Eli said, pressing a hand against her arm. The gesture was absurd, given their size difference, but somehow still grounding. "You are what this is about. Not rules, not regulations. You," a reporter from the Colony News Network approached, a Valen with recording equipment grafted into their carapace. "Why are humans protesting for Thraen rights?" Eli stepped forward before anyone else could respond. "Because she is people, not equipment, not a threat. People. If you cannot understand that, you are the problem." The reporter looked offended. Eli looked like he might say something worse. Torres pulled him back. The company's response came that afternoon, a carefully worded statement announcing a temporary suspension of pending disciplinary actions while concerns are reviewed. It was bureaucratic non-speak for, "We are stalling," but the crowd treated it like victory. Someone started cheering. It spread. In the cafeteria that evening, the celebration was loud and chaotic and absolutely terrifying for Lura. People kept approaching her, thanking her, treating her like something other than a problem waiting to happen. Mina climbed onto a table and declared, "Lura is the best, and everyone who says different can fight me." Several people laughed. No one argued. For the first time in her life, Lura stood up straight in a room full of people. No hunching, no apologizing, just standing. Eli handed her something that might have been alcohol or might have been cleaning solvent. It was hard to tell in station lighting. "How does it feel?" "Dangerous," Lura admitted, "like something is about to break. Maybe something needed to break." They touched containers in a toast, the clink absurdly mismatched given the size difference. Somewhere in the industrial sector, Brandcore watched security footage with calculating eyes. He had been the logistics manager for 5 years, climbing ranks through careful political maneuvering and strategic blame placement. Thrain workers were a problem. They were always a problem. Too strong, too different, too likely to remind people that power came in forms that could not be easily controlled. This protest was making them visible. Visibility led to demands. Demands led to changes. Changes threatened the careful hierarchies he had spent years building. Brand made 3 calls, purchased 2 favors, activated 1 contingency plan he had been saving for exactly this kind of moment. The explosion happened at 2300 hours. The blast tore through the eastern maintenance sector, collapsing 2 corridors and triggering evacuations across 3 zones. No casualties by sheer luck, the area had been marked for overnight inspection. By 23 to 20 hours, security footage appeared showing a Thrain-sized figure near the blast site hours before the explosion. The footage was grainy. The timestamp suspiciously convenient, but it was enough. By midnight, Lura was in corporate security custody. Eli tried to follow, but Torres held him back. "You go in there now. You get arrested too. Then we have no one on the outside. They are framing her." "I know. Which is why we need to be smart, not loud." In the holding cell, Lura sat on the floor because the chairs were not designed for her weight. She stared at her hands, still smelling faintly of celebration and something that might have been hope. The soul iron in her chest was cold, silent, as if it knew what she was learning all over again. Hope was dangerous. Joy was fragile. Trust was a weapon that could be turned against you. She had allowed herself to stand straight, to laugh, to imagine that size did not matter when character did. She had been wrong. Through the door she heard shouting, demands for her release. Eli's voice, hoarse with fury. The sound of someone being escorted away. Lura closed her eyes and made herself small again. Smaller than her body, smaller than her bones, small enough to disappear into the corners of a cell built for people who fit. Outside, in the protest plaza now ringed with security barriers, someone had torn down the "We Hold the Line" signs. Only one remained, trampled in the dirt, the words still visible, but barely. The evidence was damning because it was designed to be. Security footage showing a large figure near the maintenance sector. Chemical analysis proving Thrain DNA at the blast site, which meant nothing since Thrain worked there daily. Testimony from 3 workers claiming they had seen Lura acting suspiciously in the days before the explosion. The investigator, a human woman with eyes like flint, laid it all out on the table between them. "This does not make sense," Lura said quietly. "I was in the cafeteria during that time. Witnesses saw me. Witnesses who are your friends, who have motivation to protect you. I did not do this. Everyone says that." The investigator leaned back. "Here is what I think happened. You are strong, powerful. You saved people once, and it felt good. Made you feel like you mattered. But then the company started restricting you anyway. Made you angry. Made you want to remind them what you are capable of. That is not who I am. No?" The investigator pulled up another file. Military records. Thrain Defense Corps. You were a soldier, Lura. Frontline combat specialist. 17 confirmed building demolitions. 3 cities pacified through intimidation tactics. Lura's voice went hollow. "I left that life. Did you, or did you just find a new battlefield?" The interrogation lasted 6 hours. By the end, Lura had stopped defending herself. What was the point? They had decided who she was before she entered the room. In her mind, she was back on Thrain Prime. 19 cycles old, assigned to a battalion clearing resistance in the outer territories. They had trained her to be a weapon, efficient, overwhelming, merciless. She remembered the building she had demolished with her bare hands, not knowing until afterward that civilians had been sheltering inside. Remembered the silence after, the way her commanding officer had clapped her shoulder and called it acceptable losses. She had fled 2 years later, leaving behind rank and purpose and the pieces of herself that knew how to be what they wanted. She had promised herself never again. And now they were using that past to prove she had always been the monster they feared. Outside the holding facility, the Veteran Alliance was fracturing. "The military records are real," Crane said, his voice heavy. "I checked. She was part of the pacification forces." "So what? Eli snapped. "Half the people in this room have military history. That does not make her a terrorist. It makes her someone who knows how to destroy infrastructure. It makes her someone who chose to leave that life behind." Eli looked around at the gathered veterans, seeing doubt in faces that had been certain days ago. "She saved us, multiple times. You want to throw that away because she had a past?" Torres crossed her arms. "I'm not saying she is guilty, but I am saying we need more proof before we go to war over this." "War? We are talking about standing by someone who needs us." "And if she really did it?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Eli walked away before he said something unforgivable. He found her in the holding cell 2 hours later, after calling in every favor he had to get 5 minutes of supervised visitation. She was sitting on the floor, knees drawn up, making herself as small as physics would allow. "They found my military records," Laura said without looking up. "I know." "Then you know what I was, what I did." Eli sat down opposite her, the cell barrier between them. "I know you held a beam to save strangers. I know you ran into toxic vapor to pull people out. I know you taught a traumatized kid how to high-five." He pressed his hand against the barrier. "I know who you are, not who you were." Laura looked at him finally, and her amber eyes were full of something too tired to be tears. "No one else does." "Then they are idiots." "Eli." Her voice cracked. "What if they are right? What if I am just pretending to be something I am not?" "Then you are the best actor in the galaxy because I have never seen anyone try so hard to be gentle." He leaned forward. "You told me that iron in your chest carries the weight you promised to bear. You know what I see? Someone who has been carrying the weight of an entire past alone, trying to prove they are worth saving. I am not worth this. You are going to lose everything defending me." "Good thing I am annoyingly stubborn about lost causes." Laura almost smiled. Almost. The moment shattered when Torres burst through the security checkpoint, bloody and breathing hard. "They took Mina." Eli stood so fast he nearly fell. "What?" "Corporate security, 30 minutes ago. They are calling it protective custody, saying she is at risk being around Thrain sympathizers." Torres looked at Laura through the barrier. "I am sorry. I should have seen this coming." Laura was on her feet, hands pressed against the barrier hard enough to make it groan. "Where did they take her?" "Atlas II, the new facility." Torres met her eyes. Brand Corps signed the order. The name hit like a fist. Eli turned to the security guard. "Let her out. Now." "She is in custody pending investigation. She is being framed, and a child is being used as leverage. Let her out, or I swear I will make this everyone's problem." "I do not have authority to release her." Torres stepped forward. "Then get someone who does, because if that girl gets hurt while you are following protocols, you will answer to more than just us." They released Laura 4 hours later on a technicality, lack of physical evidence despite the circumstantial case. By then, Mina had been missing for 5 hours. By then, Brand Corps had activated the second phase of his plan. And by then, everyone was exactly where he wanted them, desperate, divided, and running out of time. Freedom felt like defeat. Laura walked out of corporate security into a station that looked at her differently now. Not with fear, which she had learned to expect. With suspicion, with certainty. The whispers followed her through corridors that suddenly felt too narrow, too crowded, too full of judgment. Terrorist, saboteur, traitor. The veterans' meeting that evening was missing half its members. Torres was there, loyalty written in the set of her jaw. Patel attended, but would not meet Laura's eyes. Crane sent his apologies through a message that felt like a betrayal wrapped in politeness. "We are still looking for Mina," Torres said, trying to fill the silence, following every lead. "Where is Eli?" Laura asked. "Everywhere. Calling contacts, threatening people, generally being himself but louder. Then Torres attempted a smile that did not reach her scarred face. He has not slept since they took her. He should stop. This is not his burden. Try telling him that. I did. He told me where I could shove my concerns. Lura looked at the empty chairs where other veterans should have been. They think I did it. Some do. Some do not know what to think. Torres leaned forward. For what it is worth, I believe you. But belief does not find kidnapped girls or clear names. That night, Lura returned to walking hunched. Old habits felt like armor, protection against a world that had briefly let her stand tall, and then reminded her why she should not. She found herself in the industrial sector, in the shadows between buildings where light barely reached. This was where she belonged, in the dark, in the spaces too small for anyone to notice. The company had announced new security protocols that afternoon. Preventive Security Act, they called it. No Thrain workers in public spaces without supervision. Mandatory tracking for all Thrain employees. Restrictions on movement after standard shift hours. Everything she had feared. Everything she had tried to prevent by making herself invisible. And she had failed anyway. Lura did not hear Eli approach. She only realized he was there when he sat down beside her, his back against the same wall, his small frame radiating exhaustion. They sat in silence for a long time. I should have stayed invisible, Lura finally said. You were never invisible. You were just pretending no one could see you. It was safer. For who? Lura did not have an answer for that. Eli shifted, and his hand found hers in the darkness. His fingers wrapped around one of hers, laughably small but somehow grounding. You told me that iron in your chest carries the weight you promised to bear. I remember. Let me carry some of it. Just for a while. Lura looked down at where his hand held her finger. It should have been absurd. It should have been meaningless. But somehow it was the first thing that had felt solid in days. They took her because of me, Lura whispered. They took her because Brancor is using every tool he has to win. That is not your fault. Everything is my fault. I am too big, too strong, too much of everything that scares people. You are exactly the right size for the people who matter. Eli's grip tightened fractionally. And if the world cannot handle that, the world needs to get bigger. Something in Lura's chest cracked. Not broke, cracked, like ice beginning to thaw. I do not know how to fix this, she admitted. Neither do I. But we figure it out together. Or we fail together, and at least we will have company. They sat there in the dark, human and Thrain, the size difference absurd and absolute and completely irrelevant. Eli's terminal chimed. He checked it with his free hand, his expression shifting from exhausted to alert in an instant. Anonymous message. He pulled up the contents. Location coordinates for Atlas 2. Timestamp for tomorrow, 1800 hours. And a note. This is when Core finishes what he started. Come alone and she dies. Come with an army and she dies. Come smart or do not come at all. Lura read over his shoulder, her soul iron beginning to pulse with heat. It is a trap. Obviously. He wants us to try to rescue her so he can justify eliminating all Thrain workers. Use our desperation as proof we are coordinating attacks. Probably. We cannot win this, Eli. No matter what we do, he has already arranged for us to lose. Eli stood, his mechanical leg whirring softly. He looked up at her with something absolutely reckless in his rust-colored eyes. Then we change what winning looks like. He extended his hand. Come on, we have work to do. What work? We are going to save Mina, expose Bran, stop whatever he is planning, and prove that humans and Thrain working together can do the impossible. He grinned. In the next 18 hours, with half our allies gone and corporate security actively hunting us. That is impossible. Good. I was worried this would be too easy. Laura took his hand and let him help pull her to standing, a gesture that was physically unnecessary, but emotionally everything. For the first time since her arrest, the soul iron in her chest began to warm again. Not with heat, with something that might have been purpose, or might have been the last spark of hope before everything burned down. Either way, she was done being small. She was done being sorry, and she was done letting other people decide what she was worth. Time to hold the line one more time. Eli's plan was either brilliant or suicidal, possibly both. "We need 3 teams," he said, laying out schematics on a borrowed datapad in the maintenance bay. Torres, Patel, and 2 other loyal veterans crowded around. Distraction, infiltration, and extraction. In and out in 40 minutes before corporate security realizes what we are doing. "You are describing a military operation," Torres pointed out. "I am describing Tuesday with higher stakes." 3 hours until the deadline. Eli had spent the time between making calls, cashing favors, and convincing people that this was worth risking everything. Some agreed, some hung up, some threatened to report him. The ones who showed up were enough. Laura stood in the corner, watching humans prepare to risk their lives for a cause that was not theirs, for a child they barely knew, for a Thrain they had been taught to fear. "Why are you all doing this?" she asked. Patel looked up from checking equipment. "Because someone has to, and because you held the beam when you did not have to." "That is not the same thing." "It is exactly the same thing." Torres handed Laura a comm unit modified for her size. "Here is the problem. Brand knows we are coming. He has had hours to prepare. He wants us to try something stupid so he can eliminate everyone who supports Thrain workers in one move." "So we do something smart instead," Eli said. "What is the smart version of breaking into a corporate facility to rescue a hostage from a man who has already won? We make him think he is winning until the moment he loses." Eli pulled up building schematics for Atlas II, the new facility that was supposed to replace the old complex, larger, more secure, currently occupied by minimal staff because it was still in final certification, perfect for a trap. "Bran has Mina somewhere inside. He will have security. He will have evidence planted to prove Thrain workers are coordinating attacks. He probably has explosives rigged to blow the facility and blame it on sabotage." Eli tapped the schematic. "So we split up. Team 1 creates a distraction at the main entrance. Loud. Obvious. Exactly what he expects." "And Team 2? Torres asked. "Goes through the maintenance tunnels, finds Mina, gets her out." "What about the explosives?" "That is where Laura comes in." Eli looked at her. "You find the bombs, disable them. Prove this was Bran's plan all along. I am not an explosives expert. No, but you are strong enough to rip them out of the walls before they detonate." Laura stared at him. "That is the worst plan I have ever heard." "I know, which is why it might work." He checked his terminal. 2 hours left. Everyone clear on their roles? Torres raised a hand. "What is your role?" "I'm going in through the front door and having a very loud conversation with Bran Core while everyone else does the actual work." "So your job is to get killed." "My job is to be annoying enough that he focuses on me instead of you." Eli grinned. "I am extremely qualified for this." 1 hour before deadline, they moved out. The distraction team hit Atlas II's main plaza at exactly 17:45 hours. 50 workers, human and Thrain, carrying signs and chanting about rights and justice and all the things that sounded noble when you were not about to die for them. Corporate security responded exactly as expected. Riot suppression, containment protocols, enough force to look serious without actually hurting anyone yet. While they were distracted, the infiltration team entered through the maintenance tunnels. Laura moved through corridors designed for equipment, not people her size. She had to crouch, to squeeze, to fold herself into spaces that felt like punishment, but she moved silently, years of trying to be unobtrusive finally useful for something. Patel and Torres flanked her, weapons drawn but hoping not to use them. They found Mina in a storage room on the third sublevel, locked in but unharmed. The girl's eyes went wide when she saw Lura. "I knew you would come," Mina whispered. "Of course." Lura tore the door from its hinges as gently as possible. "We need to move." That was when the alarms started. That was when every door in the facility locked down. And that was when Brancor's voice came over every speaker in Atlas II. "Thank you for coming, all of you. You have just provided exactly the evidence I needed to prove coordinated Thrain aggression against corporate interests. Security forces are authorized to use lethal countermeasures. You have 5 minutes to surrender before this facility is destroyed to prevent further threat." Eli's voice crackled over the comm. "Lura, please tell me you found the explosives." She was already running. Mina clutched carefully against her chest. "Working on it." "Work faster, he is not bluffing." The building groaned. Somewhere deep in its bones, charges were activating. Lura could feel it through the floor, the vibration of destruction preparing to be born. She reached the central support column and found them. 20 charges, industrial grade, enough to collapse the entire facility. Torres arrived seconds later. "Can you disarm them?" "No, but I can remove them." "That will destabilize the building." "The building is already going to fall. At least this way we control when." Lura handed Mina to Torres. "Get her out. Everyone out. Now." "Then what about you?" "I will be right behind you." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Torres took Mina and ran. Lura turned to the charges and began tearing them from the walls. Each one was anchored deep, designed to maximize structural damage. Each one took precious seconds to remove. Above her, the building began to crack. Outside, Eli was screaming into the comm for her to evacuate. Lura kept pulling charges, her hands bleeding, her soul iron burning white-hot in her chest. One more. Just one more. The ceiling split with a sound like the end of the world. And Lura realized with absolute certainty that she was not going to make it out. Unless she held the line one more time. The weight hit like gravity, reconsidering its relationship with physics. Lura positioned herself beneath the primary support column as it buckled, as tons of industrial architecture decided to obey the laws that said things fall and break and bury everything beneath them. Her legs bent, her spine compressed. The soul iron in her chest ignited with heat that felt like it was burning through her sternum. She held. Through the comm, she heard chaos. Evacuation orders. People screaming. Eli shouting her name with increasing desperation. She could not answer. Speaking required breath she did not have. Every molecule of air, every fiber of muscle, every fragment of will was dedicated to one simple, impossible task. Do not let them die. 30 seconds. That was all the time people needed to clear the blast radius. 30 seconds, and she could let go. Could run. Could survive. 28 seconds. The floor cracked beneath her feet, concrete powdering under pressure never meant to be borne by flesh. 20 seconds. Blue blood traced lines down her arms where her skin split. The pain was distant, unimportant. There was only the weight, only the promise, only the iron will that said some things matter more than survival. 15 seconds. Footsteps behind her, running toward her, not away. "Lura, we are clear! Move!" She could not. The column would fall the instant she released it. The building would cascade. Anyone still inside would die. "Lura, that is an order! Let go!" 10 seconds. The footsteps got closer. 5 seconds. Someone grabbed the exoskeleton frame from the fallen equipment nearby. Mechanical arms extended, bracing against the column beside her. The weight shifted fractionally. Eli's voice, strained but absolutely certain. "If you are holding the world, then I am holding it with you." "Eli, no. You will die." "Then we die together. But we are not dying today." He activated the exoskeleton's full power, servos screaming as they took a fraction of the load. "Torres, Patel, get back here." Are you insane?" Torres's voice over the comm. "Probably. Now get your asses back here and help us hold this thing." "We already evacuated." "So evacuate back in. We need everyone who can lift." Lura wanted to scream at them to run, wanted to tell them this was suicide, wanted to be anywhere but here, bearing witness to humans choosing to die for her. But she could not speak, could only hold. Then Torres was there, adding her strength to a support beam. Then Patel, bracing against a secondary column. Then more. Workers who had evacuated hearing Eli's desperate call and making the choice no sane person would make. They came back. They came back and they held the line. "We need more support!" Eli shouted, his exoskeleton beginning to overheat. "Someone find the emergency structural supports." "They are offline," Patel yelled back. "Power grid is down." "Then we reboot it." "How?" Eli looked at the exposed power conduits, then at his prosthetic leg. The one with "Don't Panic" etched into the metal. He started disconnecting it from his body. "Eli, what are you doing?" Lura managed to gasp out. "Something stupid." He pulled the prosthetic free and began rerouting its power cell. "This thing runs on a microreactor, enough juice to jumpstart the grid if I overload it. That will destroy the leg. The leg is replaceable. You are not. It will burn you. Then it burns me." He looked up at her and his eyes held everything they had built together. Every lunch, every laugh. Every moment of choosing to see her as human when the world said she was not. "You held the beam for strangers. I can hold a power line for you." Before she could stop him, he connected the prosthetic directly to the power conduit. The electrical surge was immediate and brutal. Eli screamed but held on, his hands blistering, smoke rising from the connection point as the building's emergency systems roared to life. Mechanical support arms extended from the walls. Structural bracing engaged. The weight began to shift away from flesh and onto steel. But not fast enough. The building was still collapsing, still falling, still trying to kill everyone inside it. And then, from somewhere in the chaos, someone shouted the words that would echo through station history. "Hold the line!" It started as one voice, then two, then dozens. Workers who had escaped outside heard the call, heard that people were still inside, still fighting, still refusing to let the building win. And they stopped running away. They formed a human chain, pulling debris, clearing exits, creating paths where none existed. They used equipment meant for construction to shore up walls meant to fall. They ignored every regulation, every safety protocol, every logical reason to run. They held the line. Inside, Lura felt the weight begin to ease as the mechanical supports took over, felt her legs stop shaking, felt the certainty of death recede just enough to make survival possible. "Go," she shouted to everyone still inside. "I can hold now. Everyone out." They went, one by one, carrying injured, supporting exhausted, moving with the desperate speed of people who had been given a second chance and refused to waste it. Eli was last, his hands ruined, his prosthetic destroyed, but his smile defiant. "See, told you we could hold it. You are insane, and you are still alive, so we both win." The final support engaged. The building stabilized, no longer collapsing but no longer safe. They had minutes at most. Lura grabbed Eli as gently as her trembling hands allowed and ran. They made it outside just as the eastern wing collapsed inward, exactly where Bran had planned, exactly where all the evidence of his sabotage had been planted. The explosives Lura had removed detonated in a controlled sequence, destroying the proof but leaving the rest of the building intact. In the rubble, trapped beneath a beam he had tried to use to escape, they found Bran Kor, alive but injured, surrounded by the very destruction he had orchestrated. Torres called for medical. Patel documented everything with recording equipment that would stand up in court. Eli collapsed against Lura's leg, exhausted and burned and absolutely victorious. "We did it," he whispered. Lura looked around at the gathered crowd. Humans and Thrain, standing together, covered in dust and blood and something that looked like the beginning of change. "We held the line," she said, and somewhere in her chest, the soul iron pulsed with warmth that felt like the weight finally being shared, like a promise kept. like the moment when someone who had spent their life being feared finally learned what it felt like to be held. Freedom felt like defeat. Lura walked out of corporate security into a station that looked at her differently now. Not with fear, which she had learned to expect, with suspicion, with certainty. The whispers followed her through corridors that suddenly felt too narrow, too crowded, too full of judgment. Terrorist, saboteur, traitor. The veterans' meeting that evening was missing half its members. Torres was there, loyalty written in the set of her jaw. Patel attended but would not meet Lura's eyes. Crane sent his apologies through a message that felt like a betrayal wrapped in politeness. "We are still looking for Mina," Torres said, trying to fill the silence, following every lead. "Where is Eli?" Lura asked. "Everywhere, calling contacts, threatening people, generally being himself but louder." Torres attempted a smile that did not reach her scarred face. "He has not slept since they took her." "He should stop. This is not his burden." "Try telling him that." "I did. He told me where I could shove my concerns." Lura looked at the empty chairs where other veterans should have been. "They think I did it." "Some do. Some do not know what to think." Torres leaned forward. "For what it is worth, I believe you, but belief does not find kidnapped girls or clear names." That night, Lura returned to walking hunched. Old habits felt like armor, protection against a world that had briefly let her stand tall and then reminded her why she should not. She found herself in the industrial sector, in the shadows between buildings where light barely reached. This was where she belonged. In the dark, in the spaces too small for anyone to notice. The company had announced new security protocols that afternoon. Preventive Security Act, they called it. No Thrain workers in public spaces without supervision. Mandatory tracking for all Thrain employees. Restrictions on movement after standard shift hours. Everything she had feared. Everything she had tried to prevent by making herself invisible. And she had failed anyway. Lura did not hear Eli approach. She only realized he was there when he sat down beside her, his back against the same wall, his small frame radiating exhaustion. They sat in silence for a long time. "I should have stayed invisible," Lura finally said. "You were never invisible. You were just pretending no one could see you. It was safer." For who? Lura did not have an answer for that. Eli shifted, and his hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers wrapped around one of hers, laughably small but somehow grounding. "You told me that iron in your chest carries the weight you promised to bear. I remember. Let me carry some of it, just for a while." Lura looked down at where his hand held her finger. It should have been absurd. It should have been meaningless. But somehow it was the first thing that had felt solid in days. "They took her because of me," Lura whispered. "They took her because Brand Corps is using every tool he has to win. That is not your fault." "Everything is my fault. I am too big, too strong, too much of everything that scares people. You are exactly the right size for the people who matter." Eli's grip tightened fractionally. "And if the world cannot handle that, the world needs to get bigger." Something in Lura's chest cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like ice beginning to thaw. "I do not know how to fix this," she admitted. "Neither do I, but we figure it out together, or we fail together, and at least we will have company." They sat there in the dark, human and Thrain, the size difference absurd and absolute and completely irrelevant. Eli's terminal chimed. He checked it with his free hand, his expression shifting from exhausted to alert in an instant. Anonymous message. He pulled up the contents. Location coordinates for Atlas II. Timestamp for tomorrow, 1800 hours. And a note. This is when Corps finishes what he started. Come alone and she dies. Come with an army and she dies. Come smart or do not come at all. Lura read over his shoulder, her soul iron beginning to pulse with heat. It is a trap. Obviously. He wants us to try to rescue her so he can justify eliminating all Thrain workers. Use our desperation as proof we are coordinating attacks. Probably. We cannot win this, Eli. No matter what we do, he has already arranged for us to lose. Eli stood, his mechanical leg whirring softly. He looked up at her with something absolutely reckless in his rust-colored eyes. Then we change what winning looks like. He extended his hand. Come on, we have work to do. What work? We are going to save Mina, expose Bran, stop whatever he is planning, and prove that humans and Thrain working together can do the impossible. He grinned. In the next 18 hours, with half our allies gone and corporate security actively hunting us. That is impossible. Good. I was worried this would be too easy. Lura took his hand and let him help pull her to standing, a gesture that was physically unnecessary, but emotionally everything. For the first time since her arrest, the soul iron in her chest began to warm again. Not with heat, with something that might have been purpose, or might have been the last spark of hope before everything burned down. Either way, she was done being small, she was done being sorry, and she was done letting other people decide what she was worth. Time to hold the line one more time. In the end, Lura learned a truth most humans spend a lifetime avoiding. Sometimes the things we think make us dangerous are exactly the things that make us worth standing beside. Strength was never her curse. It was her language. And when she finally stopped shrinking, the universe answered by expanding around her. And maybe that's humanity's quiet superpower. We break, we rebuild, we argue with collapsing buildings, we yell, hold the line, even when the line is mostly duct tape and questionable decisions. And somehow, against all logic, it works. Now let me ask you, when was the last time you let someone else carry a weight you swore was yours alone? What fear have you been shrinking for years? And what would happen if you finally stood at your full height? And if you had to choose between being feared or being known, who would you allow to see you as you truly are? If you made it all the way here and survived the emotional building collapse, drop the symbolic word unbreakable in the comments. Tell me your city. I want to know where in this messy galaxy you're watching from. Hit subscribe, like, hyper-boost the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that size, literal or emotional, can be a superpower. And check out the next story waiting for you on the end screen. See you on the next jump, human.